What's up guys, Joey here, Fugatech, and I know it's already December, but yet we're still covering the Redmi Note 8 Pro. What can we say? It's still one of the best priced smartphones out there in terms of the specs you get. But there's a new challenger in town, the Vivo S1 Pro. So let's check out what it's got against the Redmi Note 8 Pro. With both sporting, dashing designs, there's something unique with both phones. Of course, you won't miss the Vivo S1 Pro's diamond-shaped camera module, wherein Vivo's marketing material claims that it was inspired by jewelry. It looks classy with a bit of dazzle in this night black color that we have. For the Redmi Note 8 Pro on the other hand, it has this low-key, shimmering, metallic glass back that's protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 5. Both of these phones have curved edges, making them feel more comfortable to grip. More at the back, you'll find the quadruple rear cameras and LED flashes for both phones, as well as the fingerprint scanner for the Redmi Note 8 Pro. Up front, both sport water drop notches for their selfie cameras and call speakers. The S1 Pro has a noticeably slimmer notch, plus under its screen you'll also find a in-display fingerprint scanner. 4 buttons and ports on the right for both phones. You'll find both their power and volume buttons, while on the left are their hybrid SIM card trays. On top are their secondary microphones, plus an IR blaster for the Note 8 Pro, and a headphone jack for the S1 Pro. Lastly, at the bottoms are their primary microphones, USB Type-C ports, loudspeakers, and a headphone jack for the Redmi Note 8 Pro. All in all, both are sleek and premium looking and feeling devices, with the Redmi Note 8 Pro feeling a little bit heftier than the other. But then again, design is highly subjective, so I'll leave it to you guys on which you prefer more. For me though, personally, purely based on aesthetics, I like the S1 Pro's look a lot more. For display, the Vivo S1 Pro utilizes a 6.38-inch Super AMOLED panel with a resolution of 2340 by 1080. There's no Gorilla Glass protection specified, but we do get the usual included screen protector instead. Meanwhile, the Redmi Note 8 Pro sports a slightly bigger 6.53-inch IPS display, also with a resolution of 2340 by 1080. Nonetheless, it has Gorilla Glass 5 protection. Both displays definitely provide good colors and outdoor visibility, complemented with their slim bezels. However, the S1 Pro's Super AMOLED display obviously stands out more here with its more vibrant colors and deeper blacks. It's also worth mentioning that the S1 Pro has better viewing angles as well. So even if the Note 8 Pro has that Gorilla Glass 5 protection advantage, we're still giving the display category to the S1 Pro for its more dynamic quality. As for audio, their single downward-firing speakers perform on an average level, like most phones in their price range. They can get moderately loud with minimal lows and highs, but when you turn the volume to maximum, especially for the Note 8 Pro, it can sound very distorted. But then again, you do have headphone jacks for both devices, so for better sound quality, take advantage of those. Now let's talk about performance. Powering the S1 Pro is a Qualcomm Snapdragon 665 with an Adreno 610 GPU and 8GB of RAM. Meanwhile, the Redmi Note 8 Pro is packed with the more powerful MediaTek Helio G90T chipset with a Mali G76 MC4 GPU and 6GB of RAM. Generally, both work well when it comes to multitasking and doing basic tasks like video streaming and social media browsing. You won't really experience much delays or lags even when a lot of apps are running in the background thanks to their hefty RAM capacity. For gaming with heavy graphics, both can handle that pretty well, with some occasional hiccups, but probably less so for the Note 8 Pro, and neither of them heat up too much, which is good. Now, benchmark score should be on your screen right now. It's pretty evident in terms of raw power, however. You can definitely get a lot more performance from the Redmi Note 8 Pro's MediaTek G90T. The Snapdragon 665 is just outclassed in this regard. For software, we get Android 9 Pie for both, with each manufacturer's skin on top. That's FunTouch OS 9.2 for Vivo and MIUI 10 for Redmi. Now, these two UIs are unique in their own ways. Of course, if you're an old-time Vivo or Xiaomi user, you'll get the same experience as before, you'll be used to it. Don't expect any app drawer option from either of these skins, but I guess you can always solve that with a third-party launcher. It's also nice to know that both already have their own native dark mode, so do take advantage of that if you're into dark mode. Personally, I've warmed up to both of these skins, but neither of them are definitely my favorites. FunTouch OS has a lot of nifty features that you never thought you'd need, while MIUI is clean, simple, and easy to get used to. So for software, we're giving it a tie because just like design, it's still up to your personal preference. Now, powering both phones is the same 4500mAh capacity with 18W fast charging for Vivo and Qualcomm Quick Charge 4 Plus for Redmi. In our standard video loop test, the S1 Pro got us a total of 21 hours and 52 minutes of playback, while the Note 8 Pro scored a total of 17 hours and 10 minutes. Now, while these numbers don't completely indicate real-world usage, the S1 Pro does seem to manage its power consumption a little bit better, so for this category, we're giving it to Vivo. For biometric security, we get an optical in-display fingerprint scanner for the S1 Pro and a rear-mounted fingerprint scanner for the Redmi Note 8 Pro. They're both pretty snappy in a general sense and easy to reach, but of course, expect the Redmi Note 8's fingerprint scanner at the back, the physical one, to work faster. Because for the S1 Pro's in-display fingerprint scanner, it still takes about half a second. You can also unlock both phones via Face Unlock, which works fine for both devices, although they can slow down in more challenging lighting conditions. Now, for cameras. At the back of the S1 Pro is a quad camera setup composed of a 48-megapixel main shooter, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide, a 2-megapixel dedicated macro lens, and a 2-megapixel depth sensor. For the Redmi Note 8 Pro, that's a 64-megapixel main sensor, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide, a 2-megapixel macro, and a 2-megapixel depth sensor. On the front-facing side of things, the S1 Pro gets a 32-megapixel selfie shooter, while the Redmi Note 8 Pro gets a 20-megapixel one. In these first two photos, there's immediately a big difference when it comes to both phones' post-processing. Colors appear more vibrant but bluish on the S1 Pro, while the Note 8 Pro shows more natural-looking colors, although in this case, we do seem to get more details from the S1 Pro here. Punching into 2x zoom, we get pretty much the same effect, but now the S1 Pro's colors now pop a lot more. Meanwhile, the Note 8 Pro doesn't get too crazy, it's still looking natural. For ultra-wide, there's a bit of a fisheye effect for both phones, granted, but they aren't bad at all. But now, colors are closer to each other, with the S1 Pro still looking more vibrant compared to the more natural look of the Note 8 Pro. Now, in these two shots, we used both phones' respective high-resolution modes. That's the 64-megapixel for the Redmi Note 8 Pro and 48-megapixel for the Vivo S1 Pro. Weirdly, despite having a lower maximum resolution image, the S1 Pro produces more details and better exposure compared to the Redmi Note 8 Pro's 64-megapixel shot. Checking out macro, both phones have potential, but they're not the best, and I think with time, software can improve this for both phones. Now, checking out shots in low light with the standard photo mode used, both phones get a pretty grainy image, but we do get a clearer shot from the Redmi Note 8 Pro, as you can see from the cars in the back. Putting it in 2x zoom, both still aren't good as we get even more noise, but at least the S1 Pro produced less. In ultra-wide, we still get the same noise levels, but noticeably the S1 Pro has a more well-exposed shot. Now again, for the high-resolution modes, 48-megapixel for the S1 Pro and 64-megapixel for the Redmi Note 8 Pro, they look almost the same, but when we zoom into the no parking sign, you'll notice that the Note 8 Pro now has a more detailed shot as appropriate, even with better colors. Now, another odd thing we found about the S1 Pro's cameras is its portrait mode. It doesn't really give much of a bokeh effect, as we believe Vivo meant it to be more like a beauty mode feature here, but for reference, here's what they look like. In these selfies, the Note 8 Pro gave us a good subject background separation with a bit of a struggle in tiny spots of Iris hair. The S1 Pro, on the other hand, didn't really give it much of a blur, but we get a clearer shot, especially on her skin. Now, these selfies are taken in standard mode. As you can see, the Note 8 Pro looks softer with cooler tones. Meanwhile, the S1 Pro produces a sharper photo with boosted colors as well as good dynamic range if you take a look at the window behind Kat. In these two selfies, I do prefer the Redmi Note 8 Pro's more soft and balanced look, which works for Ira and Justine's skin here. However, we get more details from the S1 Pro again, but in this case, it looks a bit overexposed. Now lastly, for these shots, focusing on colors, we get a more saturated look from the S1 Pro, while the Redmi Note 8 Pro give a cooler yet closer to what it naturally looked like shot. So for cameras, both work well, especially when it comes to selfies, but they have their own advantages and disadvantages. Overall, in terms of what needs to be improved, Vivo definitely has a lot more of this with the S1 Pro. So for this comparison, we're giving cameras to the Redmi Note 8 Pro. Finally, let's talk about price. The Vivo S1 Pro retails locally for 15,990 pesos, and for that you get a generous 8GB of RAM and 256GB of internal storage. The Redmi Note 8 Pro, on the other hand, is available in two configurations. That's 11,490 pesos for the 6GB of RAM plus 64GB of internal storage variant, and 12,990 pesos, that's for the 6GB of RAM plus 128GB of internal storage option. So with that price difference and a big gap in both cameras and performance, you'd probably be better off going with the Redmi Note 8 Pro. That is, if you're not meticulous about getting an AMOLED display and in-display fingerprint scanner, and possibly if you prefer design. I mean, the phone just delivers well for the price you're paying, complemented by its tough form and great cameras. However, we're not exactly telling you to not go for the S1 Pro if you want it. It's also a pretty good phone with a really nice design. It's got a lot of RAM and storage. It's got a good display, a good design, and great battery life. But of course, with all that comes a higher price. But yeah, that's about gonna wrap it up, guys. I'm gonna leave the question to you. Which one would you pick? The Redmi Note 8 Pro or the Vivo S1 Pro? Let us know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, please do drop a like, subscribe to our channel for more content, hit the bell icon to notice any future uploads, and be sure to visit yugatech.com for the latest tech news and reviews. This has been Joey, and I'll see you guys in the next one.